fucking bunch of guys up here, right? Anyway, first, before we get started, I want to say thank you to the entire Health Impact team for inviting us to participate in this amazing event. It really is an honor to be here amongst all of you, innovators and experts in this field. So before we dive in, I'm Todd Ketterman. I'm with CDW Healthcare. And for those of you who are not familiar with CDW Healthcare, our mission is to improve the quality of healthcare by leveraging technology and innovation to drive better patient outcomes. That's a mouthful. Our focus is on helping healthcare organizations address challenges through the development of thoughtful and impactful solutions. But today, we're going to pivot a bit. I'm excited to introduce you to PHDX, a secure data exchange platform that we've been developing. At its core, PHDX addresses three critical phases of decentralized clinical trials: recruitment, retention, and compliance. So when we talk about recruitment, we're talking about how to connect the right patients to the right clinical trials quickly and securely. And when we talk about retention, we're ensuring an exceptional experience for patients, fostering trust and engagement. We're also talking about the type of tools that we're providing for them, and we're going to get into that a little bit with this team. And then lastly, compliance, providing robust tools to maintain regulatory adherence while respecting patient consent and data privacy. Also putting consent and control in the hands of the patient. That sounds good, right? So in collaboration between healthcare experts, technology leaders, and visionary partners, together, we are building a system that not only meets today's challenges, but is ready to evolve with the future of healthcare. So I'm looking forward to a great discussion here with this team. And before we get started, I want to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. So guys, tell a little bit about who you are, the organization that you're with, and give a brief kind of on how you're working on PHDX. And Don, why don't we start with you at the end?
Sure, thanks, Todd. My name is Don Doyle. I'm a field CTO at CDW in our central region, and my extent has been about 35 years in the IT community, putting IT products to work. And in the case of PHDX, like all products that I bring to the market for CDW, we're bringing this product to market with all compliance, all customer user experience solutions in place. And so I take my experience and I build that into the system that we call PHDX, and frankly, all the systems that we build from CDW.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Roland Robertson. I'm with Hitachi. I'm the vice president of our hyperscaler and cloud organization globally. And what we do actually in my background is really with helping data and storing and how we interpret that data on our systems, whether it's on premise within the healthcare space, and how we utilize cloud platforms in order to do that. A lot of the work that my team has done in many cases is looking at the client patient data that we have at either on hospitals, health providers, research institutions, connecting those and ensuring that governance is in place for that data and the appropriate sharing of that data. Particularly now, it's more appropriate than ever as we look at how we apply AI to a lot of that data as well. And as we extend the permission sets on how to use that type of information from our patients, in many different ways. I was listening last night to the economic forum, and the German chancellor, Olaf Scholz. So he was talking about the one of the impacting areas for the next year, and he was really looking at how AI, and specifically how to apply AI and data in healthcare, was such a significant event. And I think we can take a lot of that to the United States as well, about how this is actually going to be changing the landscape. And it's exciting to be a part of the PHDX initiative that we're part of. The solution that we provided, I think, is very robust, and it allows us to move very aggressively into that direction. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Aliyev Shor, co-founder, chief of strategy officer for Artemet. We provide enterprise SaaS AI solutions to enable health equity at a scale. We basically work with health plans, health systems, pharmaceutical companies to identify social support needs for individuals and try to address the ones we can through our nationwide partners. Basically, it's one of the use cases of AI for good. And our mission is to basically make healthcare equity a reality, which is extremely challenging, as you probably all know. There are all types of challenges with individuals, with underserved individuals, in terms of their needs, being able to identify them and being able to address them, making healthcare accessible to them, and to be able to measure the outcomes that you actually support these individuals. That's what Artemed is focused on.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carl Conley. I'm Chief Technologist of a group called CellHub. And first and foremost, before I get in and talk a little bit about what we do and what we bring to the solution here, I just want to say I'm incredibly humbled and inspired to be with you all. The stories and the technologies and the kind of innovation that's happening with this group is just phenomenal. So CellHub is what's called a primary agent. And what that means is our job is to enable, train, and support partners in the IT channel and be a liaison between the channel and a telecom provider. In this case, we're exclusive with T-Mobile for Business. So as I'm listening to a lot of you today and I'm hearing about all the innovation, I'm thinking about the connectivity that is required to support all of these solutions. And that's what we bring to PHDX. We are essentially bringing a modern software-defined cellular-based connectivity, which is essentially the fabric between the trial provider and the trial participant, right? Enabling the bridging of that digital divide that was discussed earlier, ensuring that the patient has a secure, reliable connection to the data so that they can participate in the trial. So very pleased to be here and delighted to be part of this team.
Hi, I'm Bob Rose. About 11 years ago, co-founded with a physician, a company called MedOne Solutions. And we designed and built and got FDA cleared, and today are marketing around the world a little device, shameless plug, I got a prop here. So this device enables a physician to examine a patient remotely. It's got a high resolution video system, stethoscope, ECG, thermometer, pulse oximeter, can ingest some other things. What we found out along the way, and you know, it's great because we can examine a patient remotely, but it's not an RPM device. What we found out was that it doesn't do you any good to have one unless you know you need one. And so we've got to be looking at trend analysis, which used to be everything, but now when we add AI to that, we have social determinants of health and multimodal analysis that we can add to it. And a year ago, I stepped down from CEO of MedOne in order to pursue this and come up with a new ecosystem that completes that journey for the patient. So it just works, that we have one workflow, that we have no apps, no syncing, no, you know, is it that we're asking sick people to use this stuff, right? And, you know, this morning I almost raised my hand because I was like, well, how do you get over that complexity? You just make it simple, right? Let's make it easy for people to use. In the cloud, we can do everything we need to do with the EHR interfaces and all the stuff that we've already talked about. So along the way, last year, the folks at CellHub, who were already working with CDW and PHDX, saw what I was doing, and what they were doing is naturally complementary. And we bolted all this together in order to create an entire continuum from patient recruitment to patient retention and adherence and compliance. And we'll talk about that more over the next few minutes, but it's really exciting to be here and really motivated and excited by everything I heard this morning from you guys, because I know we're in the right place doing the right thing. Yeah.
All right, guys, thanks. And I think hopefully that gives the room and everybody here a good understanding of just the consortium of partners that we're working with to pull the solution together. So the first area I talked about, we're going to hit 3 of those, is recruitment. So with recruitment, it requires secure, scalable, and effective collaboration between whoever we're doing recruitment with. It could be pharmaceuticals and companies such as retail health, right? Don, I'm going to throw this question over to you. It's kind of a, I think, one that kind of starts the conversation. Talk to us about PHDX. Talk to me about, or the room, about the underlying framework of it. Why does it work? Talk to us a little bit about, and on that recruitment phase, the important elements of that, and then we'll open it up to the rest. Thank you.
You got it. Well, to understand the system, you have to first understand its challenges, right? So the challenges have always been data that folks don't want to share because that's their livelihood. A lot of folks say data is the new oil. You'll probably hear people say that over and over again. It's because that's our livelihood, is the data. So sharing it is a problem. There's also the problem of a patient needs to opt in. And then we have this other problem of securing those communications so that the rest of the folks within PHDX can't see conversations that they shouldn't. So take that for what it's worth. We've seen these troubles, and we've seen the trouble flowing through, as Bob said, the completion of the study and its efficacy and compliance as a place where we need to find security and data secured at the same place, right? So we're securing the conversation and the data, and we found that the best way to do that is blockchain, right? Blockchain is not something that every IT organization is deploying because it's, quite frankly, it's fairly complicated. But it's a distributed ledger mechanism. So if you can imagine a patient being able to opt in and then getting their own ledger, which is tokenized, meaning you can't see it unless you have the token and you have the token to communicate with it. So imagine having both of those things that you need. So we've solved the security problem. And then some of these other pieces that you're going to hear about from our great partners bring along all the other pieces to make that happen, as CDW does the base technology piece. Now, the last piece to understand there is how can we maintain efficacy as well? And we're doing that through that same blockchain mechanism. Remember, you have a distributed ledger in blockchain. But in order for that data to flow, we have to add another component that's not very common in most of your IT organizations. It's called virtualized data or data fabric. So now we flow those things together, and frankly, it solves a problem in a lot of industries that are sensitive to security. So in the same way we're building PHDX, one last thing, we're also building financial systems, right? They have the same problem. Those financial systems need the same type of security. So we're providing it across the board.
No, I appreciate that. And real quick, I'll stay on you for a second, but when we're looking at recruitment, right, we're talking about this idea of patients coming in and providing, so in a couple different ways. And if we look at it through the eyes of a pharmaceutical company, maybe they're sitting on de-identified data already that they've purchased or they've gotten their hands on, then they're trying to come into retail and saying, hey, we want to make a match, right? Now you look at a company like CDW and we're risk adverse, we want to own the PPI, PHI and all that, so we want to stay out of it. Real quick, just can you kind of hit on the framework of PHDX from that side and how maybe we do things a little bit different? And I'll even throw this one out. Is there anybody doing this and doing it well today?
First of all, we get into projects, my team gets into projects when we don't see a solution out there. We're not in the business of plagiarism. And so we build only things that we know don't exist. And that one is one that does not exist. As far as the data goes, the key to us is we don't take your data in. We use a concept called meet them where they're at. That's my team, right? You don't want people, specifically folks that are, being treated for something that is specifically debilitating in some cases. We don't want them to have to gyrate. We don't want the organizations to have to gyrate either because big companies move slow. And so our system is built along the lines of we meet them where they're at. We might take in a patient at a checkout at a various stores that provide some sort of health services can pull them in there. We might pull them in through AI in a data set, but we don't force those organizations that have maybe 100 million records to give us their data. We give them a small shim. That shim helps sort out the data and align people to studies and also helps them bring those people in. So leave the data where it's at, leave the people where they're at, and let's meet them there.
Yeah, thanks, Don. No, thanks for going through that. And then, Ali, I'm going to come over to you because, again, because of the partnership, because of the way that we've, built by, powered by, right, the framework of this, Artemed plays a huge role, right? Can you talk a little bit about Artemed and as it relates to PHDX, the role that you play, and kind of go off of what Don's talking about? Let's stay on recruitment for a second.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things that the COVID pandemic did during the past couple of years was it made decentralized clinical trials essentially a focus point for pharma because it was challenging to identify and recruit patients during the early years of COVID. And that became a theme. People basically realized all of a sudden we could think of ways to get access to people all over the US and eventually all over the world, ideally. And that's basically the healthcare access, the equity piece we're talking about. And what Don basically described is PHDX builds the foundation in terms of the data flow in an interoperable manner, taking privacy and security into account. And when you solve that infrastructure problem, the next question that we need to deal with is going to be, we have access to records of hundreds of millions of patients in an anonymized way. We don't know who these people are. We don't get the data. And then the question is, pharma for a particular trial will need to recruit patients that meet certain criteria. So you have on one side, you have hundreds of millions of records of disparate data sources, depending on whether the partner is a retail pharmacy, is a health system, other entities that we can think of. The goal is now, based on the criteria you get from pharma, you want to identify in this large pool of patients or individuals who would match those criteria. And in some cases, you have, structured, unstructured data. And when you deal with health systems, the data sets, meaning smaller health systems, traditional clinical trial sites, managing these things is much more straightforward. But when you reach 100 million people or more, it's basically a completely new set of challenges. So basically artificial intelligence with all the developments on multimodal, modeling, the developments during the past couple of years makes this basically, a possibility for us to be able to look at all these disparate data sources from hundreds of millions of people and identify all these individuals nationally to begin with who would qualify for that trial. And then in terms of social determinants of health, how it can add value. Going back to the comment Don made in terms of meeting patients where they are. Imagine there's a patient with a rare condition living in a rural area. And the patient has all types of access problems to actually, there are statistics that says over 70% of individuals in the US, on average, they have essentially 2-hour drive. They are 2-hour drive from a traditional clinical trial site, which means traditional clinical trial sites are not a possibility for the majority of the population. But by incorporating, social determinants of health data, we're going to basically get better understanding where the patient is, what challenges they will have, and hopefully facilitate those challenges in terms of identifying them, informing them of the possibility that there is a potential, essentially, treatment for the rare condition they're experiencing, and for the patient to be able to benefit from it.
No, that's fantastic. And you hit on a couple things there when you talk about SDOH, because I think that's really important, especially when we're talking about decentralized clinical trials.
Yeah.
Don, I'm going to come back to you real quick here, because I think there's something really important we want to talk about. And that's in traditional clinical trials, right? One of the challenges that we see, or we have seen, is that it's siloed. The data that they're working with, siloed, messy, it's not up to date. There's a lot of things going on there, right? So when through this recruitment engine, or when they've been identified and they've been notified through this that, hey, you qualify potentially for this clinical trial, they then get the opportunity to provide consent and control. Yep, I want to learn more. Yep, so that's first. Then they get the opportunity to update their information, all of it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so if you think about the distributed ledger, right, it's a cloud-based thing that can extend to your phone. So if we're at that meet them where they're at stage and they just happen to be standing at the counter at their pharmacist and they says, hey, there's a thing you could this clinical study you could get into if you just enter. If they say yes to that question, they're instantly text the system by which that they can extend their distributed ledger onto their own device, getting a new token so that conversations can be made and had. Once you're into that system, I go right back to it. The data is siloed because folks want to hang on to their data. It's theirs, it's mine, it's my company's lifeblood. But in this case, we're going to leave the data right where it sits, but we're going to make those connections through Artemed and through the systems that we have without moving anything around other than yeses and nos and potentially a token with some maladies associated with it.
That's great. Roland, I want to come over to you for a second because, in this, we're talking about, secure data platforms that will need to be scalable, right? They're going to have to be elastic. They're going to have to be secure. They're going to have to grow. The size of this matters, right? From that perspective, a little bit about from again, Hitachi's perspective, how we do that on PHDX.
Yeah, the key, as you were talking earlier, is on the scale, is the amount of data that we have or the endpoints of that data. We have the ability, and what we're looking at is how do we make that data or the sources of the data plug and playable? Because the data sets that we're going to have, the entry points are going to grow, going to expand, and then they're going to contract at certain times. Because as an inpatient, as an example, just as they would have the ability to opt in and provide their data, they also have the ability to opt out. And that ability to opt out can be at any time. They might decide at a later time that they want to extract that information back out of the system or restrict it in some way. So the ability to look at a patient's data and track it through the system, whether it is through the ledger that we're talking about, because that would contain private information, or maybe taking it and de-identifying that information so that it is cleansed and it really no longer relates to the individual anymore, but it is categorized on a certain topic. So the data fabric is going to be very important on how you connect in with the different systems to do that. Now, the key for doing that, and that's where Hitachi's part of this equation plays in, is creating that ecosystem of how the data is connected, the underlying or the infrastructure of connectivity to that. And that could be anywhere from, say a hospital, a remote office. A lot of it will be operational into a cloud platform as well. But how do we create the plumbing for doing that? And how do we transport that effectively with the types of control sets that we need, whether it is a larger file that contains sensitive information or something very small, that would, like you said, certain type of criteria where we always have the patient involved into the equation, so that they know not only that their information is being utilized, but they have specific consent along the way, and they are always part of the loop.
No, thank you. We could spend a lot of time on recruitment. I want to shift now into the retainment side of this. I heard somebody say once that when we're talking about decentralized clinical trials or clinical trials in general, that we could find the patients, we can connect them, we can do that, we can do the matches. It's keeping them in that can be the challenge, right? So we've thought about that a lot, and we've thought about again, this requires a blend of trust, technology, collaboration. So as you can see by the team here, we've got folks in here that can also kind of bring value to that discussion. So I'm going to shift things over a little bit as we talk about the types of tools that we can provide that experience to the patient or the human. I'm going to throw this over to you, Carl, a little bit, talk about from a PHDX perspective.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways in which CellHub is able to provide that securely and effectively? Thank you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, our role is to really help panel partners and their customers embrace modern network technologies, which is essential today in a wide different array of vertical markets. Just to put this in perspective, I'm sure everybody in here has a cell phone, right? And I'm sure you're all on 5G, and you probably don't even think about it that, maybe I can download my YouTube video a little bit faster. For the consumer, it's a little bit better, but probably not that noticeable. But when you look at the enterprise is really where 5G is starting to shine. And 5G has been available here in the US since 2018. And specifically in healthcare is where we're seeing a lot of traction, because healthcare networks are becoming super taxed now with the amount of digitalization and data that's happening. And decisions have to be made at the drop of a dime. So last year, for example, we were the first in the nation to deploy a very large 5G deployment at a hospital. Just to give you a sense of how the 5G network has transformed, the hospital is facing a major challenge. They had already deployed or started to deploy Epic and realized very quickly that 65% of their applications were going to be accessed over a mobile network. And the network in 3 million square feet was a Wi-Fi network. The nurses, the doctors, the clinicians, the support staff were all using that network, and invariably there were a lot of dead spots in that building. Moreover, clinical triage happens everywhere, as you all know. It can happen in the car park, it can happen in an elevator shaft, it can happen anywhere at any time. And the hospital was really backed into a corner. They were facing this massive deployment of Epic, huge challenge with the network. And so they came to us and we consulted with them around how we could implement 5G. We deployed a private 5G, hybrid 5G, leveraging T-Mobile's technology. And I just want to spend a brief second just to kind of illustrate how different it is from the other carriers in the US, and then bring it home to how it will help PHDX. T-Mobile's network is the first in the US to employ what's called standalone 5G, which means that they are adhering to the latest standards that the 3GPP, an international governing body, dictates what goes into every release. That may mean nothing to you, but what it means is that the 5G network, a true standalone network, is actually a software-defined construct. The 5G release is not a single release. Every couple of years, every 2 years thereabouts, new features and functions roll into that standard. And because T-Mobile's leveraging that new standard, they can roll out those features like a software update for its consumers. That becomes very important to us, specifically in PHDX. As we are rolling out this solution, it's imperative that the data from the trial participant is handled in a secure, ubiquitous, reliable way. And the T-Mobile network has the ability to infuse security into the network. So the patient's data will traverse a network that is not the internet. It will literally traverse a SASE-infused Secure Access Service Edge SIM, which means the data is encapsulated and then routed to the trial giver, right? Not over the internet. So highly secure, highly reliable. And as we talked about, with these new releases of 5G, you're starting to see enhancements at the consumer level as well. So patients, someone was talking about the deployment of multiple sensors or a smart room at home. Think about the amount of connected devices. When a patient is wearing a device that's inconvenient, specifically in the clinical trial, we want to alleviate the burdens that they have, right? The geographical burdens of actually going to a physical location to do the trial. Now they can take advantage of the technology to execute that trial at home with these connected devices. They don't even have to think about oftentimes the element or the device that's connected to them. The new release of 5G, release 18, which is now uses what's called reduced capacity or RedCap, which means these monitoring devices can now be cellular. They can be smaller in form factor, smaller in power consumption, and produce more data. And that's imperative, right? We don't want to burden the patient that's already going through this terrible condition, most likely. They've got their life going on. They've got geographical divide. They're probably not very technical. They have a lot of challenges already. So if you can obfuscate the technology and the connectivity and just make it simple, it has to just work. It has to be brainless for them. It has to be able to support that secure transfer of data. And that's what we do. This reduced capacity, though, is the next wave. It's amazing. It can literally power devices with kinetic energy, right? So you don't even need a power source. It's that clever to leverage the 5G technology. And that's what we're bringing to PHDX. We want to be that fabric, that secure pipe between trial giver and trial participant.
No, that's-
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just real briefly, the very end of that is, okay, that's great, but you go out today and you buy 10 different devices for remote patient monitoring and you have 10 different apps and different workflows. We've solved that completely. This is a mic drop moment, okay? Through a partner company called Tenovi, it's actually here today. They have a cellular gateway. We have 40 different devices that talk through that cellular gateway. You don't have to do anything but take the reading, like the pulse oximeter or whatever, take it. That's it, you're done. It's in your record in the cloud. And what Carl said, which is so important, all the way down the line here, everything you've heard us talk about, we never touch the internet, right? Think about that in security, especially in light of the data breaches that we've suffered over the last year or so. So it's huge.
It's really amazing. So from a recruitment perspective, we've recruited the patient in, we've given them consent and control. We've allowed them to update their record. And now we're providing an experience that's providing different types of advanced data insights, secure environment, all types of stuff going back. I'm guessing that RCOs, and I'm guessing the pharmaceutical companies and those folks are going to be really interested in those data insights that are coming back, right? I'm curious, and this goes out to anybody, can you talk a little bit about that from your experience, maybe from how that is so valuable through the clinical trial?
Absolutely. So as Bob mentioned, when the patient gets recruited, we go through all these previous steps, and the patient basically has to use, depending on the trial criteria, certain remote devices that collect basically physiological, measurements, all types of other measurements. You have all these data coming in, and you have the clinical history of the patient, all their, past essentially healthcare utilization through the health systems, the medications they have used in the past, and you have patient-reported outcomes as they use these devices. They report, what they are doing in terms of their progress with the trial. All this data is coming in. So again, it's disparate multimodal data depending on what the trial needs are. Ideally, you want basically to be able to monitor all this data through multimodal AI models and to be able to predict the likelihood of success in terms of whether this treatment is actually working or it is going to result in adverse outcomes in the next, let's say, 3 weeks. You can basically, with the use of AI, you can see basically the trajectory of whether the patient is moving in the right direction or in the wrong direction. And some of the wrong direction, possibilities can basically be very significant. Traditionally, the patients sign up, they get enrolled in a trial. The trial team basically talks to the patient on a regular basis, but it is not on a continuous basis. Maybe on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, they ask the patient where you are. Is everything going well? Have you experienced anything? And the patient reports the outcomes, based on those surveys. But being able to continuously, as the data comes in from these, sensors, wearables, updated EHR records, new medications, you basically monitor the progress. You have the possibility to predict the likelihood of success and adverse outcomes and act accordingly. This is going to have advantages to the patient at the individual level and also to the sponsor, to pharma, in terms of knowing for the entire patient cohort that is part of this trial, is the entire cohort moving in a direction that is going to show efficacy for this treatment, or it is going to basically fail. And you might be able, through adaptive clinical trials, which is a relatively recent topic, the past 35 years, that's the direction essentially adaptive clinical trials are going. They are saying, even if the trial is expected to fail, and you're going to know that 2 months in advance, is there any other utility in all this effort that went into this, probably hundreds of $millions up to this point for large trials? That's, probably a fair estimate. And to see what can be done if this trial is going to fail and not just let it fail after 2 months and not being able to do anything.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just a couple of data points to go along with that. It costs about $5,000 to recruit a patient into a clinical trial. It costs $25,000 to replace them once they drop out. And the dropout rate is about 30%. So you start doing the math, it gets huge when you start getting into phase 2 and phase 3 trials. And we've also fail-safe this system on PHDX system by building in the triggers so that when a patient does start to decline or is indicating by that, combined with the multimodal analysis that Artemed is developing, that That's where the MedWine comes in, right? We don't ask you to get behind the windshield and go to the site or the ER. We're going to bring a clinician to you by a telehealth visit. And that really closes the whole loop here and causes the patient to stay engaged and stay part of the trial. Also, some of the devices that we have, we've got a smart pill box and knows if you took your medication. We can do the same with Sharps management. We know if you did your diary entry on a ePro piece of software. So now, if you don't adhere to the trial protocols, we've got interventions teed up already in the platform, so we can send you a text first, and then maybe an email, and then a phone call, and then maybe a nurse knocks on your door. But we're there proactively keeping you engaged. And the last data point on the trial failures because of either retention or recruitment is it can cost pharma as much as $8 million a day to postpone a trial, and do that for 30 days and see what it costs you. So,
Yeah, no, that's
Scott, so
Yeah.
so if I could jump in real quick on some of Ali and Bob's comments. You know, one of the interesting things, I know that everything is about the data right now. And as you said, you know, data is often said it's the new oil. It does have a sense of gravity around it, each individual and their own data, how you apply that protection around it. That's what creates that gravity and how you shift it. But one of the interesting things or experience has shown is we're connecting these disparate systems and the data elements on it. We're basing a lot of this also off established use cases, ones that we understand right now. And what the experience has shown also is that we bring these type of data sets together in new inventive ways. And now we are able to unlock a lot of that data and let it be connected, and how we categorize it correctly. And now we're applying new AI modeling to it. You know, as you stated, we're starting to see new data as a result. And these provide us the ability to, that's the exciting part, because it's something that's unknown in many cases. So it steps outside the established use cases that we're used to seeing, or we might have started the project for to begin with. And we suddenly find that there's a new set of data out there that's never been there before previously. And it has its own inherent worth at that time, that it's a new data set that you can leverage either for that particular project or others. And in some cases, it's established a separate revenue stream even that was never imagined previously. So I think that's one of the, at least me, whenever I'm looking at it from a data science perspective and how I consolidate this data, whether it be in a data lake in a cloud, or even more important, as you stated, we need to push that ability for real-time interaction closer to the edge. Having these new data sets present themselves and how do we take advantage of that new data becomes very interesting.
I would say, you know, when he talks about data gravity and the edge, the patient is the ultimate edge. And what we're trying to do in our solution is ensure that we can meet the patient where they are. So obviously, if you have a cell phone and you've traveled across the US, you've probably experienced dropped calls and the like. Big challenge, right? So what do you do if you have a community or a patient that is outside of the cellular range? With the solution that we're bringing to market, we can take advantage of non-terrestrial networks. What does that mean? It means satellites. So together, T-Mobile with Starlink have actually deployed 600 low Earth orbit satellites, which means that there's ubiquitous coverage now. So we can truly bridge that digital divide and ensure that those who are needy out in the communities that are underserved by traditional networks can now participate and take place. And I think that enriches the overall population set of any data source.
Yeah, no, guys, a lot to unpack here. I mean, we could spend all day, and we've spent a lot of time going through this. From a compliance perspective, I mean, we hit on a lot of it. Compliance is critical when managing sensitive patient data, real-time data from wearables, large-scale data sharing. You know, pharmaceutical and retail organizations adhere to very rigorous standards, compliance standards when enabling, you know, seamless and collaboration and things like that. So I know we touched on a lot of that. We don't have a lot of time. I want to open this up to the room for a second because we're getting within that kind of time frame. So I do want to open it up to the room for some questions. I hope we hit on the recruitment. I hope we hit on the retainment. I hope through all of this, you've heard about compliance. We're going to be here today. We're going to be here tomorrow. We've got a booth outside. We'd be happy to answer any questions that don't come up now, but I do want to open it up to the room for a question. Yes, sir.
So, as Don said, this is the new oil, for the oil field, because you're taking our data. I want to hear about what your thoughts are on data as currency, meaning if multiple patients are going to give you our data to develop new drugs, new algorithms of this sort, how do I benefit and my patients benefit from this in the future so that when they get ill, they get that vaccine at a reduced cost or for free or something of the sort? Because you need our data to drive this. What is the exchange for the patients beyond clinical trials, which are in there, but there's the healthy patients, the clinical trials, everything else. How do the patients use it as currency so they're protected and benefit from this in the future, not just the companies benefiting from it?
Yeah, and taking it across many industries, what I'm about to share with you is based on people, not necessarily healthcare. In the case of people, this is the new culture, right? This is where we're at, not just my kids, but me, not my grandchildren. Everybody is now in here. And so this concept of opting them in via this app is deeper than that. We kind of touched on it here, but if you can imagine, this is a place where you'll have access to anything PHDX knows about you is going to be in your app. You can see it. You can manage your own electronic life record, because it is more than that. And I'm going to get to that. But what you're going to find is that not only do users buy in, that they also start enriching their own data. So now PHDX, their app, becomes a new data source that they will just simply give you this data. And I'm working with folks across all industry, but one that's interesting to me is the life insurance industry, which is fairly close to related. The end game of healthcare is life insurance, right? And so at the end of the day, these life insurers are building a life score, which is similar to your FICO score, but it's more along the lines of everything having to do with your life. And turns out not only is it good at underwriting health insurance or life insurance based on your life score, but it's also really good. That same score is really good at determining whether you're going to pay a loan back or not. So this new concept of life score, which is being driven by those users that want to have a higher life score. Who doesn't have people in their life saying, well, I got my score up to 800. Well, mine's only 770. Well, I want to be at 800. So I'm going to go do this and that. The life score will be the new thing that takes over that. Because it's more important to the user than a simple FICO score. That's where the buy-in comes from.
You mentioned currency, and I think that's an appropriate term. I have a personal feeling that over our history, every time you go to a healthcare provider or you sign up for something, you tend to give away your data for free. And I believe that's rapidly changing depending on your location, where your personal data is valuable, and the identification of that is in some places becoming mandated by law. And so a currency is an appropriate term for that every individual's individual data will become a sense of currency that you barter and trade with to gain benefits in other areas, just like you would monetarily in some cases. So whether it's with insurance or other providers, I think that if you opt in with you are providing some level of information currency, and you should expect some level of exchange of information or benefit from that.
Yeah, I think there's also an aspect of you can't boil the ocean day one, right? So, we want to look at where we can have the most effect with the platform the earliest. And when you look at clinical trials, there's a homogeneity in the cohorts. From trial to trial, they're different, obviously, but you've got a population that's essentially the same. The deployment and the management of kits, they're the same, they're sticky, as opposed to post-acute care where everybody's a little different, and or we're only worried about 30 or 60 or 90 days, maybe as they transition, it becomes more complex. I think we'll get to that. There's going to be pressure to get us there faster, I'm sure. But we need to mature the ecosystem so that it's really robust, and then it'll be easier to answer those questions because we know how we're handling the data and we know where it can be applied with the most effect. So it's just a matter of pick your pick your windmill. In this business, they're all windmills, right? So, and this one's got a lot of impact. And I think there's a lot of close verticals. We can all think of them that we'll get there soon. Yeah.
I think we're all everybody in this room, I mean, we all are cut from the same cloth, right? We're involved in healthcare. We're all interested in better patient outcomes, right? Increasing the quality of care, right? Hopefully what you've seen through this, we're going to continue to evolve. This platform is going to continue to grow and develop. And ultimately, I think, Don, you hit on it. I mean, our goal is basically, again, going back to the patient, the human, putting consent and control in their hands. And I think that matches where we're going as an industry, right? And so this was purpose built initially as we looked at it. It came out of a need. And we, again, brought the right folks together to help develop and help to grow this. And we're excited. So we'd love to talk to you more and hear your thoughts back. And if there's a way in which we can work with you and help you in your organizations, we'd love to. So, yeah. Oh, the QR code. Sorry. So at all of the desk, you'll see a postcard with a QR code. Click on it with your phones, and there is some Q&A there. And I believe there's
There's some free swag. So I think
Perfect.
everybody saw we have out over here. That's just
Right.
the sampling, but you're welcome to choose. Also, come over, ask some questions. I've got a free Yeti cooler for whoever asks the best question or entertains me the most. So I would love to give it to you. But thank you guys so much for joining this session and hope to follow up after.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Question?
We have a question.
Hi, Desiree from Health and Hospital, Regulatory and Quality. So I'm interested to hear from you guys. In implementing this, have you looked at this from the equity lens? Implementing this modality, the results that you have in engaging and retaining your patients, have you looking at that from an equity lens? I'm interested to hear that.
So essentially, that's the promise of social determinants of health data. That's what exactly, Artemet does and brings to the table, one of the key contributions to the platform. The goal is to be able to identify individuals' social support needs. As let's say we look at, 100 million people, and it turns out for a rare condition, you have 50 people nationally who are available. And it turns out the majority, maybe all of these people are actually in rural areas. So having access to that information is gonna be the prerequisite to seeing how you can support these individuals to become part of this. Right now, you don't have access to that information. So these people do not even get the possibility or the opportunity to participate. That's one of the key, missions of PHDX, to make it accessible to everyone, regardless of where they live, what they do, what their socioeconomic status is, and to be able to support them in overcoming those barriers.
And it's part of T-Mobile's, 98% coverage? So, that's important. That's why we are on T-Mobile, because they're ubiquitous. And then when we also delete the complexity of asking sick people to use complex instruments, then we help there too. So we lower the bar on the ability to execute at the patient level across the board.
And I can tell you just real quickly that we use the leaders of healthcare systems that are in those areas. Like, for instance, the Thumb Rural Health Network in Michigan is a place that I get a lot of information from, because it's 14 hospitals in the thumb of Michigan. Everybody knows Michigan's shaped like a hand, so we kind of call things by that space. But these hospitals in the thumb, essentially all of their patients are disadvantaged in the form of being in a rural area, that they can't get to a clinical study, or they can't get to even some certain healthcare. And so we're designing systems around those folks. For instance, an Epic integration, where if a doctor wants to be a part of this, wants to get a patient to be a part of it, right in the treating room or right in their patient room, they can see an Epic what they're available, Ask the patient if you're interested. Give them the text, that thing that points to their phone, right in the patient room. So it's a thing that just didn't exist in those rural communities or any socioeconomic disadvantaged constituency in the country. So we're consulting with them on a daily basis.
If here for 1 second, let me just kind of summarize. So there's most of these guys were too kind and didn't mention it, but there's a whole lot of money to be made by hospitals, health systems, practices, if they work with partners like these to get into the program for clinical trials, right? So the number one reason to jump into this, of course, is you want rare conditions solved. Rare conditions to be solved needs to have lots and lots of medical research. That is, of course, clear. But the why would you do it? There's a boatload of money in it, right? Like a boatload of money in it. So the way that you enter that money supply is, I mean, and if you haven't seen MedOne, check it out. Really, really nice stuff that that they've created. This is one of the few things where, like, if you're out and doing home health or health at home, and you want to give each paramedic one of these kind of devices, it can actually do real remote diagnostics. So you can ship the equipment, and instead of shipping 5 or 6 or 7 pieces of equipment, you get one device that can do all of that. Now, I think Roland and team on the Hitachi side, what you got there is the ability to share data without having to send it. So leaving data where it's at and processing it remotely. I don't know if you can talk about whether you're using homomorphic encryption or anything like that in order to do distributed queries, but that's a massive deal because most of what we do today, everybody's afraid of each other for the reason that Michael mentioned is, I'm not giving you my data. Well, I'm not giving you my data. I'm not giving you my data. We're like, no, we can share the data without having to send it to each other. So definitely talk to Roland and team because what they've got there is actually very, very interesting things here. So the main thing to do is as you go out and we'll have a break after the next session. But check out these guys because there's a lot of us are still working on razor thin operating margins. We're like 1.5%, 2.5%. Things are coming back a little bit after COVID. But anything where you guys can look at and say this can add to top line revenue without me having to go hire more staff. I mean, these guys literally just gave you several $100 million just for people in this room over the next 5 years. So have a chat with them because there's a lot of ways of benefiting with that. Did I misrepresent any one of you? No? All right, please. A big round of applause, please.